Now that your wife is gone, mourn her, gather your things, and don't ever return," my son-in-law announced at the dinner table, and my daughter. She simply smiled faintly and gave a slight nod. The house was never truly yours anyway. I left, but not to pack, not yet. I went straight to the bank where I set the wheels of my plan in motion. Before we dive deeper, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. The fork quivered in my grip as I looked across the dining table. It had only been 7 days since we buried Martha. 7 days of hoping for comfort, empathy, even a touch of kindness from the children Martha and I had nurtured, protected, and poured our lives into. But instead, Perry reclined in his chair like he was the rightful owner of everything around him. "Harold," he said, his voice slicing through the silence like an icy gust, "we need to talk." Sienna wouldn't meet my eyes. My daughter, my baby girl who used to crawl into my arms whenever thunder scared her, now twisted her wedding ring like it was burning into her skin. The roast beef I'd carefully cooked sat untouched, growing colder by the minute. "What's troubling you, son?" The word tasted unnatural. Perry had never felt like a son to me, just a man who captured my daughter's heart 12 years ago. "This house," he said, sweeping his hand around the dining room, the same room where Martha once served homemade pies, where Sienna used to blow out birthday candles, where laughter and love once lived. "It's too much space for just one person." My chest ached. "I've lived here for 23 years. "Exactly," Perry said, his grin flat and empty. "It's time for a change. Sienna and we need room. Real room, not that cramped apartment we're stuck in." I turned toward Sienna, desperate to find the compassion I thought I'd instilled in her, but she just stared into her plate, as if it could reveal the right words to say. "Sienna," I whispered, my voice splintering. She looked up at last, and those eyes, Martha's eyes, looked straight through me, hollow and distant. "Perry's right, Dad," she said softly. "This house, it's just too much for you now." Those words stung deeper than any wound. Too much, as if decades of mortgage payments, repairs, memories, and love meant nothing. As if I had become an inconvenience. "And where exactly do you think I should go?" I asked, setting my fork down before my hand could betray more emotion. Perry leaned in, like a predator sensing an opening. "Somewhere appropriate for your age, senior housing, maybe assisted living." "Appropriate," I repeated, the words sour in my mouth. "Dad, you're 67, Sienna added, her tone rehearsed, like she was tutoring a child on basic arithmetic. "Mom's gone. You shouldn't be rattling around this big house by yourself." Rattling around as if I were just a leftover screw in some broken machine. Perry stood, walking over to the window overlooking Martha's rose garden. "Look, Harold, we're just being practical," he said. "Sell the house. Move somewhere smaller, easier. Everyone benefits. Everyone benefits." The phrase echoed like a cruel joke. Everyone but the man who had built this home with his own 2 hands. "You could get a nice apartment," Sienna continued, her words now tumbling together. "Low maintenance, no stress, peace of mind, peace of mind." They were wrapping exile in the glitter of convenience. I stared at her, searching for any trace of the little girl who once cried when she accidentally stepped on daisies or tried to nurse broken-winged birds back to life. But that version of her was long gone, replaced by this stranger using her face. "And what if I say no?" I asked. Silence stretched between us, tense like a drawn bowstring. Perry returned to his chair and sat up straight, preparing himself like a man about to issue orders. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Sienna warned, her tone now icy. Harder, as if grieving the death of my wife and being evicted from my own home wasn't already cruel enough. Perry cleared his throat. The sound was harsh, sharp, intentional. And then, he spoke words that shattered everything. "Now that your wife is dead, grieve, pack your suitcases, and don't come back." It knocked the air out of me. Just like that, Martha was reduced to your wife. 38 years of love of life, dismissed like a casual mention. Dead pack, never come back. Each syllable felt like a dagger, designed to cut. I waited for Sienna to protest, to flinch, to say anything, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Perry's right, Dad. It's time." Something inside me hardened, not shattered, not crumbled. Hardened like water turning to ice. I stood slowly, and surprisingly, I felt steadier than I had. In a week, I said just 2 words. 2 words that carried the weight of 38 years of marriage, 23 years in that house, 67 years of life, lived with integrity, and 7 days of grief they'd used as ammunition. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled on my jacket. Behind me, Perry's voice rang out, smug and self-satisfied. "Smart move. Harold will help you look at some places tomorrow." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that somehow roared inside my chest. The chill of the evening stung my cheeks as I stood motionless on my own front porch, staring at the windows still glowing with that soft, golden light, warm, inviting. My home, my history, my people who once were my family. I walked to my car with slow, deliberate steps, each footfall a farewell. As I drove off, I didn't glance at the rearview mirror. I was done with retrospection. Something unfamiliar was forming where my heart used to beat, something solid and unshakable. Back in my study, I cleared the table with robotic precision. The dinner dishes clinked faintly, the only sound in the wake of Sienna and Perry's departure 20 minutes earlier. Their car doors had slammed shut with the finality of gunfire. Now, silence settled like fog. Over the walls of this house, our house, mine and Martha's, I sank into the old leather armchair that had cradled me for 15 years of long nights and quiet mornings. A framed graduation photo on my desk caught the light from the lamp. Sienna, age 22, beaming in her cap and gown, her arms looped tightly around Martha and me. $89,000. That's what her education had cost me. Every tuition bill, dormitory fee, textbook, and cafeteria melee paid them without hesitation, watching my bank balance drop while her future soared. It was May 2013. University auditorium had been packed wall to wall, but I saw only her. When they announced her name, Sienna Marie Butler, Martha squeezed my hand so tightly that her wedding band left an imprint in my palm. Our little girl crossed the stage, like she belonged at the top of the world. Later, in the parking lot, she wrapped her arms around my neck, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't believe you did all this for me, Dad," she choked out. I remembered thinking, 89,000, worth every penny. I'd gone through the receipts recently. I had saved every one. "You gave me everything," she once said. "You're worth every dollar, sweetheart. I promise I'll take care of you and Mom when you're older. I swear, Dad, family looks after each other. Family takes care of family." Those words, once a vow, now echoed like a bad punchline. I reached for the picture frame, my fingertips gliding over Sienna's younger face through the glass. 5 years after that graduation, she needed another bailout, this time $65,000 for a down payment on a home. She and Perry couldn't qualify for the mortgage on their own, too many loans. Credit too weak. They'd sat on my living room couch, Sienna's eyes red-rimmed, swollen from tears. "We'll pay you back, Dad, every cent, with interest," she pleaded. Perry nodded beside her, but even then, his thank you felt half-hearted. Sienna, though her desperation had been genuine, she wanted that house like she'd once wanted her degree, completely, feverishly. I cut the check the very next morning. Then came the wedding. 2 years ago. $23,000 for the country club venue, catering, flowers, and photos. Martha was already showing signs of the illness that would eventually steal her away, but she was insistent. "She's our only daughter, Harold. Let's give her a day she'll never forget." During our dance, Sienna whispered in my ear, "Thank you for everything, Dad, for making this so perfect. I'm the luckiest daughter alive." Perfect. The word felt poisonous now. I stood and walked to the filing cabinet in my archive of bank statements, receipts, and records. Martha used to tease me about my obsessive tracking of our finances, but I always told her numbers don't lie. They tell truths people are too polite to say aloud. College, $89,000. Down payment, $65,000. Wedding, $23,000. Miscellaneous loans, cars, emergencies. Perry's failed business venture, $38,000 total. $215,000. Over 2/3 of my life savings invested into Sienna's dreams. Each transfer made with a full heart. Every check signed with pride. A sudden memory. Sienna at age 7, wobbling down our driveway on her first bicycle. Me jogging beside her, holding the seat as she found her balance. "We'll always be a family, right, Daddy? Always, sweetheart. Family takes care of family." She'd understood what that meant once, or so I thought. My phone buzzed against the wooden desk. A text from Sienna. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. This is really for the best. We'll help you find a nice place tomorrow." Understanding, as though I'd given my consent. As though being pushed out of my home without dignity was a rational, loving decision. I stared at the phone until the screen went black, then slowly set it down. Something was changing in me, freezing over. Not pain anymore, not heartbreak. Something sharper, colder. They thought they knew me. Harold Butler, the giving father, the sorrowful widower, the predictable pushover. But they miscalculated. 3.5 decades in finance had taught me more than how to save and lend. I'd learned about power, leverage, timing. I opened my laptop and began typing. I needed to see, clearly, what my so-called generosity had actually purchased. By dawn, I was lying in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Martha's pillow still had the shape of her head pressed faintly into the fabric. I hadn't slept a minute. By 7 a.m., I was showered, dressed in my sharpest navy suit, the one I wore to boardrooms and broker meetings for over 2 decades. And I had made my decision. Desert Community Bank rose in downtown Scottsdale like a monument of steel and glass. I had walked those halls every day before retiring 3 years ago. I knew the layout like my own breath. I remembered every vault, every handshake, every lesson. And now, it was time to put all of that to use. Strolling through the lobby felt like revisiting another era. Harold Butler, the front desk assistant's grin was sincere. "It's been months since we've seen you. Are you meeting someone today? James Morrison, if he's free. It's regarding a financial review." 20 minutes later, I was seated across from James in his office in the corner. Same polished oak desk, same framed family portraits, same exacting neatness. I remembered it all. James had been a co-worker of mine for a decade and a half, a precise man with a talent for details. "You're looking good, Harold," he said, pouring coffee from a stainless steel thermos. Though I was saddened to hear about Martha, she was a remarkable lady. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the mug, feeling the familiar gravity of financial matters in my grasp. "I need clarity on the financial risks I've taken backing some loans." James's demeanor shifted into professional focus. "Of course. Which obligations are you referring to?" "My daughter's home loan and anything tied to my son-in-law's business dealings." His fingers flew over the keyboard. Files surfaced and his raised eyebrows revealed growing concern. "Well, since you co-signed on Sienna's primary mortgage and the home equity loan, I can certainly explain your liabilities." "Home equity loan?" I asked. "I hadn't known about that. Mortgage payments have been inconsistent for 8 months. James continued, eyes on the screen. "Currently they're 2 months behind. That could hurt your credit standing." 60 days. I felt a pinch in my chest. "And Perry's business accounts?" James hesitated, a silence more telling than words. "The equipment loan you backed for. Morgan Construction defaulted 4 months ago. That's $78,000 in original balance plus interest and penalties." $78,000. I slowly set my coffee cup down. "Harold, I need to ask, are you fully aware of their financial condition?" "Apparently not as much as I should be. The home equity loan was maxed out 6 months back, $45,000 drawn against the house, coupled with missed mortgage payments and Perry's loan default." James leaned forward. "Your liability is substantial. If defaults continue, you could be on the hook for over $120,000. The figures struck like punches. They hadn't just used up the funds I gave them, they borrowed on top of that and still failed to repay. "There's more," James said, lowering his voice. "Perry filed for business bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. It shields him from creditors, but your guarantees are still valid. 2 weeks ago, that aligned with when they started plotting their scheme." "James, hypothetically, if all these accounts went into full default, what would happen to the house?" "Foreclosure would begin within 90 days. It would be sold to cover the debts. Given market rates and balances due," he estimated quickly, "you might see $10,000 to $15,000 left in equity after liens are cleared. There's dollars on a house I put $65,000 down on." I rose and shook James's hand with the same firmness I'd shown in countless boardroom meetings. "I appreciate your honesty. This gives me what I need to make some choices." "Harold," James called just as I reached the door, "if you need documentation for legal action, I can prepare a complete liability summary." "That would be excellent. Thank you." As I walked to my car, my pace had changed deliberate now. The morning sun glowed warm across Arizona, promising a perfect day. Seated behind the wheel, I opened my phone and scrolled until I found the contact I needed. 3 years into retirement, but I still remembered which lawyers specialized in financial recovery and estate restructuring. Sienna and Perry thought they were taking advantage of a grieving old man, but instead, they had awakened someone far more dangerous, a former banking analyst who now fully grasped just how fragile their situation was. By late afternoon, sunlight stretched across my desk as I laid out James's documents. 3 hours had passed since I'd left the bank, and the analytical part of me, the banker's mind, was now in full command. The paperwork sat neatly, arranged by date: loan contracts, payment logs, notices of default forming a timeline of economic collapse. Beside them, my trusty calculator and a legal pad filled with numbers. 35 years of assessing credit risks had trained me to see between the lines of financial records. The story these papers revealed was worse than I'd feared. Perry's construction firm hadn't simply declined, it had imploded 6 months ago. A $50,000 equipment loan had ballooned into $78,000 with late fees and compounding interest. He'd used personal credit cards to keep things afloat, gambling family funds on a sinking ship for separate cards. $23,000 in total revolving balances. The monthly minimums alone consumed nearly 40% of their income, assuming Perry even had steady work. But it was the mortgage file that revealed their real panic. Sienna's residence, the very home for which I had contributed a $65,000 down payment, was now 3 months overdue on its mortgage. The bank had the legal right to initiate foreclosure proceedings within the next 60 days. But that wasn't the end of the story. There was another alarming discovery. A home equity line of credit I had never even heard about, which was completely maxed out at $45,000. They had taken out additional debt against the property in order to cover Perry's business losses, and then, in a desperate attempt to keep things afloat, they borrowed even more to pay off what they had already borrowed. I leaned back slowly in my chair, silently observing dust particles swirling in the beams of sunlight filtering through the room. The financial figures laid out in front of me told a grim story, one of individuals slowly drowning in debt, making increasingly reckless and panicked decisions just to stay afloat. Perry had filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks prior, shielding himself from claims by his business creditors. But unfortunately, the financial guarantees I had provided remained active and enforceable. They weren't simply hoping for help, they were depending on my home, not because it was a better living situation but because it was their only viable option. Their cramped apartment wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the only arrangement they could afford while barely keeping up with the minimum payments on an avalanche of compounding debts. My phone vibrated. A text message from Sienna lit up the screen. Dad, we found a lovely assisted living facility in Tempe, much more suitable than that big empty house. Can we schedule a tour tomorrow? Much more suitable. Her carefully chosen, clinical wording couldn't disguise the true intent. This wasn't about my well-being or happiness. This was about logistics, about calculating how many square feet they could trade for a lowered monthly mortgage. They weren't thinking about me. They were thinking about survival. Their survival. I stood up and walked slowly to the filing cabinet Martha and I had used for keeping critical documents. I dug past folders and paperwork until I found exactly what I needed: copies of every single loan agreement I had ever co-signed for them throughout the years. The scope of my financial liability was staggering. If Perry's business debts were ruled in court and resulted in a judgment, the creditors could legally come after me for the full outstanding amounts. If Sienna's mortgage was foreclosed, the resulting deficiency balance would also fall on me. A conservative estimate of my total risk, approximately $140,000 in potential financial claims. But then I remembered liability cuts both ways. As a cosigner, I wasn't just exposed, I also had rights, legal rights. Rights that allowed me to request complete financial transparency. Rights that enabled me to protect my financial interests. The rights they had clearly never expected I would assert. I opened my laptop and began typing. It was time to find out exactly what protections the law provided me. The Arizona revised statutes were surprisingly detailed about the rights of guarantors. Section 473605, in particular, caught my eye. It stated that co-signers could demand immediate repayment or even cancellation of their obligations if certain conditions were met. Conditions such as hidden debts, unauthorized use of guaranteed credit, or intentional fraud against the guarantor. My phone rang again. Sienna. Hi, Dad. Did you get my text about the tour? I did. My voice, even to my own ears, sounded different, steadier, calmer, more deliberate. Wonderful, they have an opening next week. You could be settled in by the end of the month. End of the month. That was 23 days away. Sienna, I said quietly, I need to ask you something important. Are you and Perry experiencing financial trouble? There was a long silence, an uneasy suspended pause that felt like holding one's breath. Why would you ask that, Dad? Because I care. Not just as your father, but as someone who has helped support many of your financial decisions over the years. We're fine, she said, her voice a bit too quick. We're just trying to find a place with more room for our future. A future built on the foundation of my home, my savings, and my fractured trust. I see, I said. Well, we'll talk more tomorrow about the tour. I'll let you know after. Ending the call, I stared blankly at the wall, at the framed college diploma that belonged to Martha, hanging just beside my own. She'd always been the more trusting one. She chose to see the good in people, but she was also the one who'd insisted we keep thorough records of every financial transaction we made. Trust, but verify, she used to say, especially when it came to money and family. Now, I finally understood why. Tuesday morning brought the phone call I had been expecting. It came at precisely 8:45 a.m., the time of day when desperate people tend to contact family, early enough to create a sense of urgency, but not so early as to raise suspicion of panic. My coffee was still hot when the phone rang. Seeing Sienna's name on the screen stirred a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Good morning, Sienna, Dad. Her voice had a tremor I hadn't heard before. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all. I've been up since 6. I leaned back into my chair, watching steam spiral from my coffee mug. What can I help you with? I asked gently. There was a short pause before she spoke again, her tone measured, rehearsed. I need to talk to you about something important, about our conversation on Sunday. Which part of it? Well, the part about the house, and some financial difficulties Perry and I are dealing with. Financial difficulties, I repeated, a painfully vague term for what was clearly a financial crisis. I'm listening, Dad. We're going through a rough patch. Perry's construction jobs haven't been consistent, and we've had some unexpected costs. Her voice cracked slightly. We just need a little help. Temporarily, $15,000 would get us back on track. $15,000, not nearly enough to solve their actual problems, but possibly just enough to stall the next collapse for another few weeks. No, Sienna. Another long pause. A silence that stretched between us once again. I'm sorry. What? I said. No, I'm not going to lend you any money. Dad, I don't think you understand. This wasn't about a vacation or indulgence. This was about survival. They were on the brink of losing their home. Could lose it. That was wishful thinking. The reality was far worse. They were already 3 months behind on payments, without someone stepping in to rescue them. Foreclosure was imminent, likely within the next 60 days. And by someone, they clearly meant me, the dependable father who had always bailed them out in the past. I understand exactly what's happening, I said. But you've always helped us, Sienna pleaded. When I needed tuition, money, when we bought the house, when we got married, you've always been there. To be exact, I'd been there to the tune of $215,000 over the years. But that was then. Things had changed. "Dad, what's wrong with you?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Panic was starting to take hold. "This isn't like you. We're family." Family, a word that seemed strangely convenient now, considering how quickly she'd forgotten it when she told me to pack up and leave their lives behind. "Are we?" I asked quietly. "Of course we are. Dad, please. I know Sunday was rough, but we can work through this. We just need $15,000 to bring the mortgage current." "And my answer," I said firmly, "is no, Sienna." She sounded stunned. I don't understand." Her voice wavered. "You have the money, you know you do, and we'll pay it back. We always do." That, actually, was not true. Not once had they ever paid back a single dime. Every so-called loan had, over time, quietly transformed into a gift thanks to a practiced combination of teary-eyed gratitude and deliberate forgetfulness. "No," I repeated. "No means no. Dad, please." Now came the desperation, real, raw, and unmasked. "The mortgage company called yesterday. We have 2 weeks before they initiate foreclosure." She was begging, but I knew better. My estimates were more accurate than hers. They didn't have 2 weeks. The acceleration clause in their loan agreement would trigger before that, demanding immediate repayment of the entire balance. "Have you thought about downsizing?" I asked calmly. "Maybe finding a place that aligns better with your current financial situation." "Dad, are you being serious right now?" she gasped. "That house is our home, our future. You helped us buy it, helped them. A $65,000 down payment, my name on the guarantee, and my credit backing their dreams. Their so-called home was actually built on the foundation of my financial stability." "Sometimes," I said, "circumstances change." "Circumstances? What circumstances? Dad, talk to me. What's really going on?" What was going on? The answer was simple. Their devoted father had finally realized the exact price of their love. Apparently it cost one large house and his complete removal from their lives. "I've made my decision," I said flatly. "This is because of Sunday, isn't it?" Her voice now higher, more frantic. "It's about what Perry said. He didn't mean it. We were stressed. We were scared. We could buy Sienna." "Dad, wait." I ended the call and placed the phone on the table. It immediately started ringing again. I reached over, turned the ringer off, and returned to reading my newspaper. The financial section featured an insightful article on rising foreclosure rates in Arizona. It seemed many families were learning the hard way that living beyond their means eventually came with consequences. Outside, a mockingbird sang from its perch in Martha's rose garden. The roses were blooming better than they had in years. Martha would have been pleased. She always said the garden thrived when it was carefully tended and unapologetically pruned. Sometimes, the most loving thing you could do was cut away the diseased branches.
My phone buzzed. A new text message lit up the screen. "Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this." I deleted the message and poured myself another cup of coffee. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. 2 days after I said no, the notifications started rolling in. Credit alerts on accounts I had co-signed. As the guarantor, my monitoring system flagged each attempt as they tried applying for emergency loans. 3 banks, 3 rejections, all within hours. By Wednesday afternoon, I was parked across the street from Perry's construction site, silently observing the unraveling of their world through my windshield. He stood beside an incomplete foundation, phone to his ear, making animated gestures. Even from a distance, his frustration was visible. His supervisor approached twice during my 20-minute surveillance. Both conversations ended the same: Perry turning away stiffly, shoulders clenched with tension. Men under pressure make dangerous mistakes, especially in construction, where misjudgments can cost lives. On Thursday morning, I visited Common Grounds Coffee, the longtime hangout for local bankers and financial professionals. I'd built strong relationships here over 3 decades, relationships that today were proving valuable. Harold Butler, as I live and breathe. It was Margaret Walsh from First National Bank. She slid into the booth across from me. "I haven't seen you since Martha's memorial," she said. "Taking it one day at a time," I replied. "The house is quiet, but staying busy helps." She nodded, stirring her latte. "Speaking of staying busy, we had an interesting application come through yesterday. Your son-in-law, Perry Morgan." I kept my face neutral. "Oh, high-risk profile, debt-to-income ratio hovering around 60%. Recent business bankruptcy, multiple inquiries all across town." She shook her head sympathetically. "We couldn't touch it, not with a 10-foot pole. And from what I hear, neither could anyone else." 60%. That was worse than even I had calculated. "Family finances can be complicated," I offered. "This went way past complicated," she replied. 3 months of missed mortgage payments, maxed out credit cards, the whole mess. She lowered her voice. Between us, Harold, they're probably looking at foreclosure in less than 2 weeks. I hated turning them down, but we have shareholders to think about. So even my earlier timeline had been too generous. That's unfortunate, I said mildly. Margaret gave a soft sigh. The sad part is, if they'd had a qualified co-signer, someone with good assets and clean credit, we might have been able to work something out. A qualified co-signer. The irony wasn't lost on me. After she left, I finished my coffee and reflected on what I'd learned. Perry and Sienna were learning the hard way that once trust and credit were broken, rebuilding them wasn't easy. A solid reputation could take decades to establish, and mere moments to destroy. On my way home, I passed their apartment complex. Sienna's car sat motionless in the lot, its hood popped open, steam rising from the engine. Another expense they couldn't afford. She stood beside the vehicle, phone in hand, likely calling mechanics whose bills she couldn't pay. Back in my study, I logged into the credit monitoring service I used to track every account where I was still legally tied. The activity over the last 2 days painted a dire picture. 7 loan applications, 7 denials. Each failed attempt chipped away at their credit score, making the next even less likely to succeed. My phone buzzed again. Dad, can we please talk? I know you're upset about Sunday, but we're family. Families help each other through hard times. Families help each other. Funny how that phrase resurfaced now. It hadn't come up when they'd told me to disappear from their lives. I deleted the message without replying. The nightly broadcast aired a detailed report concerning the escalating number of home foreclosures sweeping across Arizona. Young couples, financially overextended and living above their actual means, were now realizing that credit had its limits. The journalist interviewed a housing advisor who emphasized the need for timely intervention, strong familial support networks, and the critical role of transparent discussions surrounding financial hardship. Transparent discussions. If only Perry and Sienna had chosen that path, one built on honesty instead of resorting to coercion and threats. My phone rang. Sienna again. I stared at it, letting it vibrate 7 times before voicemail finally kicked in. 60 seconds later, a soft chime sounded. Dad, it's me. Look, I know things didn't go well between us last Sunday. Maybe Perry came off a bit too aggressive about the house situation, but we're truly struggling. I've never asked you for anything without paying you back. But this time it's different. This isn't just money. This is our home, our future. Please, call me back. Never asked for anything without repaying it. Apparently, she had no memory of the $73,000 in unpaid loans I'd forgiven over the years, treating them as gifts rather than debts. Their so-called future was built on my endurance, my generosity, my unwavering willingness to bankroll their aspirations. Now that the figurative bank was closed, they were only beginning to glimpse what their future truly looked like. I poured a glass of scotch and eased into Martha's favorite armchair. Outside the window, the desert dusk smeared the sky with shades of tangerine and coral, radiant, unforgiving, just like the terrain it blanketed. Then came the call I had been anticipating. Friday night, 7:30 p.m., the hour when desperate men let go of their pride and dial the one number they swore they wouldn't. I allowed the phone to ring 3 times before answering. Harold Butler. Harold. Perry's voice cracked, strained from a week of rejection. We need to talk. I'm listening. Look, I realize Sunday didn't go well. Maybe I was too blunt about the house, but we're family, and families come together during hard times. Family. That word always found its way back when finances were involved. Is that what we are now, Perry? Family? Of course, Harold. Listen, we're in real trouble. The banks won't work with us. Something about our debt-to-income ratio, too many credit pulls. I don't understand all that jargon, but I did. A 60% debt-to-income ratio was financial suicide in today's lending environment. Financial jargon can be tricky, I offered. Harold, we need 15 grand. Just short term. We'll sign contracts, pay interest, whatever terms you need. But without help, we lose everything, everything. Their home, their credit score, and most of all, their illusion of my endless support. If I remember correctly, Perry, you once told me to pack up and never set foot in your house again. The silence stretched between us like a frayed wire. That was a misunderstanding, he stammered. I was overwhelmed by concern. The house is too big for you. I feared for your safety, alone in all that space. Even his apology reeked of superiority. An interesting interpretation. Harold, please. Martha would have wanted you to help us. She adored Sienna. She loved our family. She wouldn't want this house lost. Martha. Now they were weaponizing my late wife as emotional collateral. The nerve was almost impressive. Martha is gone, Perry. I make my decisions now. What's happened to you? His tone sharpened, anxious. This isn't the Harold I remember. The one who paid for college, for the wedding, the down payment on the house. The Harold who never asked questions, who accepted a thank you instead of repayment. That Harold died last Sunday. Maybe you never knew me as well as you thought. This is about Sunday, isn't it? About what I said. His voice trembled now. Harold, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I never should have told you to leave your own home. Not that he didn't mean it, just that he shouldn't have voiced it. Your apology is acknowledged, so you'll help us? No, why not? His voice erupted across the line. You have the money. You and I both know that. What's 15,000 to someone with 300 grand stashed away? 300,000. That was uncomfortably close to my actual savings. Where did you get that number, Perry? Sienna might have mentioned that. Doesn't matter. What matters is you can help, and you're choosing not to. Choosing. As if generosity was a mandatory obligation. You're right. I am choosing. You son of. He stopped, breathing heavily. Harold, I'm trying to be civil, but you're pushing me too far. We're talking about your daughter's future. Your grandchildren's future inheritance. Grandchildren I'd never met. From a daughter who'd cast me out. Are you threatening me, Perry? I'm giving you facts. If we lose the house, ruin our credit, go bankrupt, everyone is affected, including you. Everyone, except the man they exiled. I think we're done here. Wait, Harold, just tell me why. Why won't you help us? What did we do to deserve this? What did they do? They had converted my grief into weakness, my compassion into a revenue stream, my generosity into a dependable income. They had twisted Martha's funeral into a stage for financial manipulation. Perhaps. Ask yourself why no bank will approve your loan. Silence returned heavier this time. What exactly do you mean by that? He asked, his tone suddenly guarded. Exactly what I said. What aren't you telling me? Everything. My network, my co-signer privileges, my strategic insight into their crumbling financial structure. Good evening, Perry. Harold. Don't you dare hang up. I ended the call and switched off the ringer. Beyond the window, the evening sky was ablaze with crimson and gold, magnificent, relentless. Like justice. A vibration. A new text. Perry, this isn't over, old man. Not even close. I smirked and erased the message. He was right about one thing. This was only the beginning. By Saturday morning, I had gained perfect clarity on what to do next. Perry's veiled threats had crossed a boundary that demanded an intelligent response. If he wanted a high-stakes game, I'd show him what true, professional strategy looked like. My first destination, the Business Research Center at the Public Library. After 23 years in the banking world, I knew this: every business leaves a trail, and Desert Vista Construction LLC would be no exception. A quick search through the Arizona Corporation Commission database uncovered some telling facts. Over the last 4 months, Desert Vista had filed 3 late payment notices with subcontractors, cash flow difficulties, hold-ups in securing permits on 2 city-funded initiatives, and an unresolved workers' compensation claim still undergoing investigation. I printed out the corresponding documentation and turned my attention to databases specific to the construction sector. The situation became more evident. Escalating material prices, a shortage of available labor, and delayed municipal reimbursements were financially suffocating smaller contracting firms across Arizona. Desert Vista Construction was clearly in choppy waters. At Common Grounds Coffee Shop, I happened to run into Bob Henley, a former client and now retired official from the city planning department. Our chat began with casual remarks about Martha's memorial service, but it gradually shifted into a more serious discussion about industry trends. The construction business is ruthless right now, Bob said as he stirred his coffee. Half of these small contractors are just one failed project away from filing for bankruptcy. I nodded, realizing how vital permit compliance must be in such a precarious environment. Now more than ever, Bob agreed. With the increase in safety rules, strict insurance mandates, and tough labor protection regulations, one single infraction can shut down an entire job for weeks. That piqued my interest. I mentally jotted down a reminder to dig deeper into Desert Vista's permit and safety compliance history. Any companies in particular causing headaches for the department? I asked. Bob leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. Well, just between us, there have been whispers about Desert Vista Construction. Nothing we can take official action on just yet, but their safety practices are pretty lax, and their insurance paperwork has been submitted late more than once. Safety protocols, insurance compliance. In construction, these weren't just boxes to check, they were the fine line between staying profitable and getting entangled in red tape and lawsuits. Back home, I devoted my Sunday morning to cross-referencing public filings with insider industry reports. The extent of Desert Vista's financial distress was far worse than I had previously estimated. They owed $67,000 to a concrete supplier, $42,000 to an electrical subcontractor, and had failed to pay 3 insurance premiums on time. But the most revealing discovery came from the Better Business Bureau records 2 recent complaints filed within the past 30 days. Both cited incomplete work and ongoing payment disputes. Alone, neither complaint would collapse a business, but together, they raised serious concerns about Desert Vista's dependability. I retrieved my old list of professional contacts. Retirement hadn't completely cut me off from my network. David Marsh, an executive at Southwest Insurance Group, still handled workers' comp policies for most of the region's contractors. Sarah Adams, who worked in municipal licensing, had been reviewing permit applications for over 20 years. Both of them owed me favors from my earlier days in banking. By Sunday afternoon, I had discreetly reached out to 3 different agencies. I wasn't making accusations, just asking careful, concerned questions related to compliance and risk mitigation, the kind of professional due diligence any seasoned business analyst would perform. David, I said on the call, I'm doing some informal consulting, and Desert Vista Construction came up as a potential collaborator. Their insurance coverage appears acceptable, but I wanted to confirm their claim history and payment status. David didn't hesitate. Harold, just between us, they're on very thin ice. They've had 2 late payments, and if there's a third, we're obligated to inform the bonding company. If they miss another premium, their policy will lapse. A lapse in insurance coverage. In the construction world, that's not just a financial inconvenience, it means immediate project shutdown and possible legal consequences if a workplace injury occurs. Sarah Adams was just as forthcoming. Desert Vista? She repeated. They've had several issues with permits lately. Nothing catastrophic, but it points to poor internal management. Their foreman submitted incomplete safety plans twice just last month. Incomplete safety plans. Another glaring red flag. The type of oversight that puts a company squarely on the radar of regulatory authorities. I spent Sunday evening compiling my findings into a coherent report. Desert Vista Construction was clearly walking a financial and legal tightrope. They were under pressure, cash-strapped, struggling with delayed permits, and barely meeting safety inspection standards. They needed every job to go off without a hitch, every approval to come through on time, every detail to pass under inspection without a blemish. Unfortunately for Perry, companies in such vulnerable positions often found that minor issues escalated into major disasters, especially when those issues were brought to the attention of the proper authorities. I drafted a brief email to Bob Henley. Bob enjoyed our conversation yesterday over coffee. Thought you might appreciate these compliance summaries, especially the section regarding safety violations. Just for your awareness, I attached Desert Vista's recent public records, documentation of permit delays, insurance lapses, and safety deficiencies. Nothing secret, nothing altered, just well-organized public information presented in a clear, professional format. The email would arrive in Bob's inbox Monday morning. He'd read through it and almost certainly pass it along to his former colleagues in planning and safety. Standardized communication circulated among professionals tasked with ensuring community safety. Within 7 days, Desert Vista Construction would find themselves under the kind of intense regulatory inspection that could halt operations and drain financial resources. Perry had once issued threats against me. Now, he would discover the true face of influence. Monday arrived bearing the confirmation I had long anticipated. Perry's worn pickup truck was parked in their driveway by 3:15 p.m., nearly 2 hours earlier than his regular return from Desert Vista Construction. Stationed at the corner coffee kiosk, I observed him through my rearview mirror, frozen behind the wheel for almost 10 full minutes. When he finally stepped out, his slumped posture carried the unmistakable weight of a man whose life had collapsed inward. The regulatory storm I'd engineered had gained momentum faster than anticipated. Desert Vista's permit violations had now escalated into a full-on project termination, triggering massive layoffs with immediate effect. Perry vanished into their modest home. Moments later, escalating voices echoed through the thin walls and unguarded windows. Even from the street, his agitation vibrated the air. Through the front window, I could see wild hand movements and the kind of furious pacing that made the entire structure appear to pulse with anxiety. Tuesday broke with the piercing sound of Sienna's scream. I had deliberately stationed myself at the local park, pretending to read the morning paper while quietly observing their home from a respectable distance. Her scream split the dry desert air like a pane of glass cracking under pressure, raw anguish fused with shock. Perry had confessed $78,000 in concealed business debt, a pending bankruptcy filing, a chain of deception that had propped up their comfortable lifestyle for months. From the kitchen window, I could glimpse Sienna's silhouette flailing, her movements frantic and emotionally unhinged. Perry stood stiffly, arms spread in what looked like defensive rationalization. Their unraveling marriage played out like a silent drama, filled with rage and betrayal but devoid of sound. Sienna then stormed out, phone pressed to her ear. Her first call, lasting roughly 3 minutes, was likely to her sister in California. The second call was briefer, more urgent. By the fourth call, she was pacing their driveway, her voice slicing through the stillness of the morning. "Mom, I know it's early, but we need help. Real help. Perry lost his job. And there's more, so much more." She vanished back inside, only to re-emerge 10 minutes later, once again dialing frantically. This routine repeated itself throughout the morning, a desperate blitz of phone calls to anyone who might offer financial rescue. By midday, Perry had made 2 visits to the liquor store and 1 to a pawn shop, judging by the small boxes he carried, likely pawning personal possessions. The classic signature of people drowning in debt. I moved locations, setting up in the public library's parking lot for the remainder of the afternoon. I kept them in view while projecting the image of a man running mundane errands. Their collapse was unfolding even more swiftly than I had dared imagine. At around 2:00 p.m., Sienna's friend Rebecca arrived, staying for roughly an hour. Through the open front door, I overheard fragments of their emotionally charged conversation, tears, frantic appeals, hopeless confessions, the sound of someone suddenly realizing there was no safety net left. When Rebecca departed, her face bore that familiar expression, a painful blend of sympathy and quiet relief that comes when you're not the one being asked for help. Nightfall ushered in the true collapse. Their argument had spilled out onto the front porch, their voices now too loud to pretend everything was fine. Standing in my front yard, ostensibly tending to Martha's roses, I could hear every blistering accusation. "You bankrupted us." Sienna's voice cracked under the weight of heartbreak. $78,000, Perry. How could you hide that? I was trying to save the business. I did it for us, for our future. Our future? What future? We lose the house in 6 days, Perry. 6 days. Your father could help. 1 phone call, 1 transfer, and it all goes away. My father? Sienna laughed bitterly. You told him to pack up and disappear. You think he forgot that? His reply was drowned out by the slam of their front door. Sienna remained outside, collapsed onto the steps, face buried in her palms, sobbing with the raw pain of someone whose life had shattered in mere hours. I reeled in the garden hose and walked back inside, content with the day's reconnaissance. My strategy had delivered results beyond expectation. Their marriage, already hanging by a thread due to money issues, was now breaking apart under the crushing weight of deceit and despair. Phase 2 of my plan was now complete. They'd lost their income, maxed out their credit, and now were watching their most sacred bond, marital trust, collapse. Tomorrow would begin Phase 3, but tonight I'd pour myself a glass of scotch and bask in the methodical beauty of watching people reap what they had meticulously sown. As the sun dipped low, the desert sky bled crimson and gold. Justice, it seemed, were nature's most magnificent hues. Wednesday night delivered the final act I had expected. Peering from my front window, I saw them approaching, Sienna gripping Perry's arm like a crutch, both moving with the resigned gait of the utterly defeated. The doorbell rang only once, a soft, uncertain sound. I took my time. Straightening my tie, I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. In these moments, timing and image were paramount. Dad! Sienna's tear-streaked eyes met mine. Thank you for seeing us, I replied coldly. Perry, I nodded. I stepped aside, allowing them entry without offering any warmth. Please, come in. We moved into the living room, where I claimed my usual seat. Martha's chair sat empty beside me, a quiet monument to what they'd cost me. Perry and Sienna sat rigidly on the couch, like schoolchildren summoned by the principal. I assume you've come with something to say, Sienna broke first. Dad, we're in serious trouble. We know we messed up, said things we regret. Mistakes, I repeated, the word rolling off my tongue with surgical detachment. Interesting choice of language. Harold, I owe you an apology, Perry said, voice strained from the effort of swallowing his pride. What I said that night about packing your bags, that was unforgivable. I was overwhelmed with anxiety over our deteriorating financial condition, and I unfairly directed that frustration toward you. Our collapsing financial state haunted me. Even in his attempt at contrition, he subtly revised the narrative. You were overwhelmed, I acknowledged. Stressed about what, exactly? Perry's jaw clenched. The direct question compelled him to expose vulnerabilities he had long concealed. Business complications. Debt burdens I should have disclosed to Sienna much earlier. How much debt are we talking about, Perry? The silence thickened and dragged on, creating a palpable discomfort. Sienna gazed at her husband with a fresh wave of heartbreak. Even now, he hesitated to fully admit the magnitude of his betrayal. $78,000, Perry finally confessed. That's a significant amount. I kept my voice composed and clinically neutral. And your employment status? I was laid off on Monday. The construction sector is in decline. Construction sector instability, not regulatory investigation sparked by concerned community members reporting public safety violations. Perry still failed to grasp the depth of the crisis he was truly facing. Dad, please. Sienna's voice cracked under the strain. We're going to lose the house in 5 days. I've contacted everyone I know. My sister, college friends, anyone who might offer help. No one has access to that kind of money in such a short time frame. No one except the father she and her husband had once forced from his own home. And now you're thinking of me, your family. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You're all I have left since Mom passed. She would have wanted us to stick together, to work through this mess. Martha, they were using my deceased wife's memory to stir empathy from me. Your mother valued integrity more than anything. She kept exact records, insisted on complete transparency in every financial matter. Sienna didn't catch the underlying meaning, but Perry's eyes narrowed subtly. He was beginning to sense there was something deeper beneath my measured words. Dad, I know I've made mistakes. I haven't been the ideal daughter, but I'm still your little girl. Please don't turn your back on me now when I need you the most. Your little girl, the same daughter who had stood by silently while her husband demanded I pack my things and vanish. What exactly are you asking me to do? Lend us money, Perry interjected quickly. $40,000 would cover the overdue mortgage payments and buy us time to secure employment. $40,000, a fraction of their total debt, but enough to briefly delay their inevitable downfall. That's a large request. We'll pay you back, Sienna vowed. With interest. Whatever terms you set, we'll sign the paperwork. We'll even offer the house as collateral. Offer the house as collateral. The same house I had already contributed the down payment for, the same mortgage I had personally co-signed and guaranteed. I understand. I reclined in my chair, carefully studying their desperate expressions. And if I say no? The question lingered in the air like smoke refusing to dissipate. Sienna's shoulders trembled as she tried to hold back her sobs. Perry stared downward, his face a battlefield of pride clashing with hopelessness. Then we lose everything, Sienna whispered. Our home, our marriage, our future. A future built on half-truths, maintained by manipulation, and now crumbling under the weight of consequences they never thought they'd face. I slowly stood and walked toward the window overlooking Martha's flower garden. The roses were in full bloom this year. She had always believed that proper pruning was vital for strong growth. This is quite the dilemma you've managed to land yourselves in. Behind me, I could hear Sienna quietly crying. Perry's breathing was heavy and uneven. They were both waiting, hanging on my decision, clinging to every syllable I might utter. For the first time in weeks, I felt a deep, resounding sense of poetic justice. Before I consider your request, I said, turning back from the window, I believe you deserve to know precisely how you ended up here. Sienna wiped her face, confusion surfacing in her tear-stained expression. What do you mean? I mean very little of what has happened to you is mere coincidence. I moved toward my desk and opened the center drawer where I had kept an organized collection of every deliberate move I had made. Perry's face shifted from defeated to drained as I withdrew a thick manila folder bursting with documentation. Let me show you something revealing. I laid out a detailed timeline across the coffee table between us. Monday, March 18th, I met with my old colleague, James Morrison, at Desert Community Bank. Perry's face went pale. You did what? As a co-signer on your loans, I was legally entitled to review your financial condition. James conducted a very thorough assessment. I revealed printed credit reports, $78,000 in business debt, 3 months of unpaid mortgage, credit cards maxed out at 60% of their available limits. Sienna looked dazed. Dad, I don't get it. I performed a full professional risk analysis of your finances. With 23 years in banking, I can recognize when someone's too far gone. I turned the page. Your debt-to-income ratio had reached 65%. Statistically unsustainable. You were analyzing us? Perry asked, his voice filled with dawning horror. When Sienna reached out for $15,000, I had already anticipated the request. The timing was mathematically predictable based on your spending patterns and cash flow. You planned to decline us. Perry, you once ordered me to leave and never return. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for that level of cruelty? I unfolded more pages. The banking network in Scottsdale is tightly connected. Margaret Walsh at First National, David Adams at Community Trust, Sarah Morrison at Southwest Credit Union, all former clients of mine. Perry stood, face reddening, with furious realization. You blacklisted us. I shared valid concerns about repayment risk and financial instability. All data I referenced was publicly accessible. You sabotaged our credit applications. I offered professional analysis to colleagues, making informed decisions. Sienna stared at me like I was a stranger. Dad, what are you actually saying? I'm saying that Desert Vista Construction was already at risk before I raised workplace safety concerns with Bob Henley at City Planning. Their permits were shaky, insurance premiums overdue, safety procedures inadequate. You got me fired. Perry's voice cracked into a whisper. I ensured that the proper authorities had full visibility into the public safety hazards. What happened to Desert Vista afterward was the result of their own misconduct. I retrieved the final document, my handwritten strategic timeline. Every phone call, every delayed response, every coincidence, all calibrated to deliver maximum psychological impact at precisely the right moment. You orchestrated all of this? Sienna's voice wavered with disbelief. From the instant Perry instructed me to gather my belongings, yes, I replied evenly. For over 3 decades, I specialized in assessing fiscal weaknesses and identifying strategic pressure points. Applying those same analytical techniques to your scenario wasn't personal, it was professional practice. Perry suddenly lunged forward, snatching the papers from the table. You manipulative old watch your tone, Perry, I interrupted, my voice cold and firm as steel. You're standing in my house, still seeking my support. He froze mid-motion, hands quivering as he scanned through the meticulous notes I had compiled, the dates, the strategic moves, the names of influential contacts, and the methodical dismantling of every option they had left. You ruined our marriage, Sienna whispered, her accusation cutting through the stillness. Your marriage was an unintended casualty, I responded. The objective was clear consequences for unacceptable conduct. We are your family, she cried. Families don't tell one another to vanish after almost 4 decades of dedication and sacrifice. You were the one who redefined our relationship that Sunday evening, I said, my tone unwavering. Sienna sank into the couch, the full weight of the betrayal crashing down upon her. How could you do this to your daughter? How could you stand by while your husband ordered me out of my own home? With fury, Perry flung the papers across the room, my carefully organized documentation now scattered everywhere. You're a monster. I am a professional who used structured reasoning to resolve a personal conflict, I said, unmoved. You made the mistake of threatening someone you believed was powerless. You've now realized otherwise. The room fell into a heavy silence broken only by Sienna's quiet sobs. They were both beginning to comprehend the sheer scale of the trap they'd walked into, laid out by the person they had underestimated. "Now," I said, settling back into my chair with the calm control of someone who had just won, "shall we begin discussing the conditions under which I might consider helping you?" Perry knelt, gathering the scattered pages with trembling hands. His face burned red with rage and shame. Sienna remained motionless, collapsed on the couch, slowly absorbing the brilliance of her father's calculated strategy. "These are my terms," I said, voice steady and commanding. "You wanted my assistance. Let's talk terms." "Terms?" Sienna barely managed the word. "You told me to pack up and vanish. Now you're here, in need of my help. That requires a reassessment of the relationship, one based on reality, not entitlement." Perry looked up from the pages, hatred burning in his expression, dulled only by desperation. "What do you want?" "First," I said, "a written apology. Public acknowledgement that your treatment of me was both inappropriate and cruel. It must be printed in the neighborhood newsletter and posted on social media. You want us to publicly humiliate ourselves?" "No," I said. "I want the truth acknowledged. I want you to set the record straight about my character and dignity. Your neighbors witnessed how you disrespected a grieving widower. They deserve to know that you now recognize how unacceptable that behavior was." Sienna slowly nodded. "Okay, we'll write the apology. Second," I continued, "you will treat me with the respect owed to the family patriarch. No more snide remarks, no more financial assumptions, and absolutely no commands regarding my living situation." "Yes, Harold," Perry muttered through clenched teeth. "Third, any support I provide comes with clear boundaries. You will follow my financial advice, attend marriage counseling, and maintain employment I find acceptable." "You want total control of our lives," Perry accused. "I want to ensure that my resources aren't wasted on individuals unwilling to change." I walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and retrieved my checkbook. The only sound in the room was the quiet scratch of my pen as I wrote, "I'm prepared to offer 25,000 enough to prevent foreclosure and give you a window to rebuild properly." Sienna's eyes widened. 25,000? But we need 40 to fully recover. You need to learn the difference between being rescued and being assisted. I'm not restoring your old lifestyle. I'm preventing absolute collapse so you can build something stable." I tore the check from the pad and placed it on the coffee table. "This offer is conditional, monthly updates, full financial transparency, counseling participation, verified employment, and respectful communication." Perry stared at the check as if it were both salvation and venom. "And if we decline? Then you may leave my house and handle your situation alone. I will no longer be involved." The silence stretched. They weighed their pride against the need to survive, dignity against desperation. "We accept," Sienna said softly. "Every condition." Perry's jaw clenched as if he were chewing glass. "Yes," he finally muttered. "We accept your terms." "Excellent," I replied, lifting the check slightly beyond their grasp. "You'll receive it tomorrow after the public apology is submitted. Tonight, use this time to reflect on just how much your circumstances have changed." I walked them to the front door. Their defeated bodies stood in stark contrast to the arrogant postures they carried 2 weeks ago. "One final thought," I said as they stepped onto the porch. "You assumed I was weak because I was mourning, generous because I loved, helpless because I was older. You mistook kindness for foolishness and patience for powerlessness." Perry turned around, rage twisting his features. "This isn't over, Harold." "You're absolutely right," I said. "It's not over. It's just beginning with new leadership." I closed the door and returned to the living room, collecting the papers from my strategic timeline. Outside, I heard the engine start. They drove away, 2 people who had just learned that cruelty comes with a cost. Back in my study, I opened the small frame holding Martha's photo and smiled at her gentle, knowing face. "I think you'd be proud," I whispered to her. "They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. And now they know exactly who I am." The house fell into a quiet, satisfying stillness. Justice, I had learned, is best delivered with precision,